In 2010, I was driving from New Orleans, Louisiana to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me, 24-year-old female, and my 2-year-old pit bull, in a 14-foot U-Haul truck with everything I owned crammed into the back, a fancy flip phone, and a printout of my MapQuest directions. I think the first smartphones actually came out around that time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a long time, and my giant U-Haul was really low on gas. Just when I was starting to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I saw a small town coming up. I pulled into this town and it's tiny. I was so worried about other things that I never really paid attention to the name of the town, but there were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I go gas up and I'm ready to get back on the road, except I cannot, for the life of me, find my way back to the highway. I circle the town about 4 times and start getting a little frustrated because it's such a tiny town. How the fuck can I not find my way out? I can literally see the highway, but I can't get to it. I return to the gas station and ask for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. When I enter for directions, there's a skinny, nondescript guy who has black hair hanging down in front of his eyes that look like he could use a good wash. He's not particularly creepy, but a little rude. He never really met my eyes. He was looking down at a magazine. He gave me directions that didn't sound right at all. He was telling me to take the road that will get me to the highway is about 17 miles. For a moment, I was just dumbfounded. Then I point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town. Why so far to get back on the highway? I can literally see it from town. He is so casual, almost like I'm just an annoyance, and can follow his directions or not. Why should he care? He gave me some explanation about the road curving around that didn't really make sense. He doesn't look at me. Just whatever, I gave you directions, and waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I get back in the truck, and as soon as I put the key in the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that, no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. But I knew right then and there that there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet this was the only store on this little road, and, short of knocking on doors, no thank you, there was no one else to ask for directions. I decided I didn't give a shit that this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my way out, even if it took me all damn night. Then a red beater of a pickup, as much rust as metal, pulls up and disgorges the quintessential Texas man. Huge, husky, and in a flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of the truck and approached him quickly yet wary. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being, or at least I was hoping I did. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I know it was silly, but I couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset. So he made me laugh and very cheerfully gave me the directions for a hairpin curve turnoff right at the end of the small concrete tunnel I'd passed several times. He said it often confused travelers because it was so hard to see, and that they needed to put up signs. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles was it back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. Miles, miss? I'd say about a quarter mile at the most. You could see the highway from right here. At this point, I couldn't help it. I had to know. What happens if I drive 17 miles that way? I gave him the directions the man in the store gave me. Texas looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about that route. It was pretty far out and usually only locals knew about it, so I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes and asked what the attendant looked like and if I had a map of the state. No, just MapQuest, which wasn't helpful in this situation. He goes into his truck and grabs a raggedy local map from his glove box. Spreading it out for me, he traces the route I describe, the way the man from the gas station had told me to go, led away from the town, away from the interstate, and led seemingly in the middle of nowhere. The man told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me that it was nothing but some junk cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. The family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics, and these were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. And the clerk that I talked to before was part of that family who lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in the Texas man's eyes as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts and told me to be careful traveling out there. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my U-Haul or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully, I didn't have to find out. Oh, and I learned that sometimes angels look like Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. Thank you, random Texas stranger. You saved my ass, and I'll always remember you with tons of love. Sorry I didn't ask your name. You're forever Texas to me now. When I was 13 or 14, I was walking down the trail with my friend along a lake to go fishing. After we made a turn on the trail, my friend kept asking me if I could see what was up ahead. I didn't know what he was talking about, as I didn't see anything, but my friend was getting more and more agitated, and then he told me to get out my knife. I was confused and asked him why. He just said, "You can't fucking see it?" We were almost underneath him when I saw him. A man in his 30s or 40s sitting on a large beach that overhung the trail, about 15 feet in the air. He looked at us and said, "I was hoping you two didn't see me." My friend and I ran faster and further than I've ever ran until we were back in the road. I get chills thinking about it to this day. This took place in Marin County, California in either 1989 or 1990. I'm an 18-year-old female. Last year, I was living in a very rural town in the middle of the mountains. Most small western towns only have one road that goes into the big city. Our road in particular was about 50 miles of empty highway, surrounded only by cliffs, fields, and the occasional farm. At the very entrance to this road, once you enter the city, is a huge truck stop, gas station, that was always packed. My mom and I were headed back home after a midnight showing of whatever movie we had decided to see. As per usual, we stopped to fill up on gas and get a drink for the long drive. As we were leaving, I vaguely noticed a dingy, older Jeep pull out at the same time we did, but of course, I didn't take much notice of it. It wasn't weird that someone would be leaving at the same time as us. As we started down the pitch black road, the Jeep kept a steady pace behind us. Again, not weird, until it came flying up past us before disappearing behind a hill. My mom and I just scoffed. We were going 60, but when people knew the roads well, they would often drive them close to 100, even at night. Eventually, we came up to the Jeep from before. It was pulled over, but the back half of the vehicle was in the road, and what was clearly a man's arm waving out the window, gesturing for us to pull over. Of course, we passed it. The man flies past us once more and pulls over again. He does this once more, and my mom and I began to get very nervous. After passing him the third time, he flies up behind us, tailgating us. He was driving so close that we couldn't even see his headlights in our rearview mirror, and he was honking his horn every so often, waving his arms for us to pull over. He carries on with this for about 30 minutes. My mom and I are terrified. She's white-knuckling the wheel. I'm holding a pocket knife to make myself feel better. I swore at my own mom for the first time that night, begging her, "Don't you fucking dare pull over." If you've ever seen that movie Rest Stop, this is all that was going through my mind. The road was a dead zone for service, so we couldn't call the police or anyone. The picture of us dead or worse on the side of the empty road was the only thing I could think about. But as soon as it had started, it ended. The man slammed on his brakes, turned around, and went back. The ride home was silent, and I ended up sleeping in my mom's room, out of fear. The next morning we had a discussion, and came to the conclusion that he had seen two lone women traveling at night, and thought we would be easy pickings, which he would have been right. Some people suggested that he had seen us drop money or a receipt at the gas station, and wanted to be a good Samaritan. I think that's ridiculous. Nobody following two women home in such an aggressive manner has good intentions. We moved out of town a few months later for unrelated reasons, but just before we did, the same car was reported following a group of 4 men on their way to work, so maybe he just likes to scare people. Either way, that night was easily one of the scariest of my life. Yesterday, I took my son fishing. He wanted to go to a nearby lake that we haven't been to in quite a while. It's not known to be a great area. For some background, the last time we went, about a year ago, a car drove by and screamed, "Nice ass," at me while I stood there with my young son. This kind of garbage behavior is unfortunately expected in this area. It is known as a late night hookup spot, as well as a late night drug deal location. Due to the lake's reputation, I had made a deal with my dad that I wouldn't stay there past 4 p.m. without him. Onto the story. My 12-year-old son, who looks much younger than he is, and I pull up to our favorite fishing spot, a small pond on the opposite side of the road as a lake. Almost immediately, an older gentleman approached, asking if there were fish in this pond. I replied that we had just got started, so nothing yet, but that we caught fish in this pond plenty of other occasions. He thanked us for the information and returned to his spot on the other side of the road. About 15 minutes later, a younger man approaches the older man with a dog. I can see and hear them chatting, but they've made no move to involve us in the conversation, which I'm glad for. I just want to enjoy the day with my son. Unfortunately, the water in this pond is incredibly low and murky, and I could tell that we weren't going to have any luck. I tell my son to pack up, and we'll try another spot on the other side of the lake. As we begin to pack up our gear into the trunk, the younger man yells over, "Sorry if my dog and I ran you off." I tell him it's no problem, and we're simply moving to a better spot to fish. He then starts telling me how nice it is to see a mom taking her kid fishing, and how you don't see that very often. I get this a lot. I'm pretty used to it. We have a short conversation about it as I pack up, and then I move towards the driver's side of the door to depart. Before I can leave, the younger man starts up another conversation, this time asking me how old I think he is. This feels strange to me, but I'm nice to a fault at sometimes, so I answer his question. I tell him I'm a horrible judge of age, but maybe 25. He tells me he's 38 and that I'm too kind, and I laugh off saying something like, "I work with teenagers, so they always guess me well above my age just to be mean." He asks me where I worked, and I stupidly tell him my city. Turns out he lives there too. How he got a free apartment on such and such street because his baby mama kicked him out of his house. I think he's talking about some kind of government assistance program. Weird flex, but okay, man. At this point, I'm standing by my car door with my hand on the handle, and my son is already in the back seat. This guy can't take a hint and starts telling me all about his awful baby mama and how women are supposed to be submissive, quiet, and do what they're told. He specifically says, "I mean, it's cool that you can bait and hook or whatever, but you're still a woman." Now my alarm bells are blaring. This guy struck up a conversation by commending me for doing a typical dad thing with my kid. Now he's putting me down for the same thing. He's gone from being overly friendly and complimentary to agitated and ranting. I should have just been rude and got in my car and left, but I've unfortunately been conditioned, like many other women, to be polite even when we're uncomfortable. Instead, I start making comments in hopes that he'll see that I'm not some meek, submissive woman who's gonna agree with him. After all, I'm a tatted up chick with eyebrow piercings and 2 lip piercings. I don't exactly look like a submissive little housewife. I guess I was trying to make him just as uncomfortable as he made me, in hopes that he would leave me alone. After he says women shouldn't be loud or opinionated, I tell him, "Oh, well, you wouldn't like me at all." He tries to backpedal and say, "I mean, it's okay to be loud, I guess, but don't try that with your man, you know?" I say, "My man doesn't tell me shit. I do what I want." This kind of back and forth goes on for a while before he finally shakes his head and says, "I just don't understand what kind of woman would act like that." I reply, "A strong one." As soon as the words left my mouth, the older gentleman yells from his spot of the bank, "Yeah, say that again, honey." This distracted the creep long enough for me to hop into my car and lock the door. I still didn't feel safe though. Unbeknownst to the creepazoid, only 2 of my car doors actually have functional locks, but at least there are the 2 on his side. I put the key in the ignition, no dice, nothing. Of all the times for my car to act up, it chooses now. Panic has now set in. As I repeatedly tried to start my car, I could see him out of the corner of my eye. He's taking notice of my car troubles and is trying to get my attention. As he takes a few steps towards my car, the car engine finally roars to life and I peel out of there. Only then do I let my composure crumble and I have a long talk with my son about what just happened. To the older gentleman who took notice of my discomfort and provided a distraction, I gladly meet with you again any day. To the younger, misogynistic creep, I don't know if I was actually in danger from you, but my gut said I was. Let's not meet again. Oh, and to my dad, I'll make you a new deal. I'm never going to that lake alone again, regardless of the time of day. I'm a male. A few days ago, my girlfriend and I, young 20s, were on the home stretch of a big road trip with our dog. As it had been a while since we last stopped, we pulled into a rest stop off the freeway to stretch our legs and have our doggo take a shit. When we pulled up into the rest stop, there were no cars and 3 big semi-trucks parked in a line. Immediately, my girlfriend got out to go into the restroom. I leashed up our dog and stood next to the car. And as she was walking towards the entry door, I thought I heard someone yell behind me. To my surprise, it was a trucker in the driver's seat of his truck with the window rolled down, trying to get my attention. Now, I'm generally pretty friendly towards all people, whether they seem shady or not. Generally willing to be a helping hand. Behind me in the truck was an older gentleman, large, with gray hair and sunglasses. His truck was loud so I couldn't hear what he was saying, and I yelled back, "What?" The trucker yelled something inaudible 3 more times as I asked him, "What?" while shaking my head and holding up my hands to inform him that I couldn't hear him. At this point, he seemed visually annoyed that I said "what" 4 times. Okay, understandable. I wanted to see what the deal was with this guy, so I walked halfway between the car and his passenger side truck. "What did you say?" I asked. "Can you help me look for my phone? I lost it somewhere," the trucker said. At this point, I was super caught off guard, as this all unfolded within 20 to 30 seconds that we were parked at the rest stop. To me, it was weird that this trucker was asking a random person stopping at a rest stop to help look for their phone, but maybe he just wanted me to call it. "Where did you lose it at?" I asked. "I lost it in my truck. Can you come up here and help me look for it?" The trucker replied in an unnerving tone. In that moment, I was sketched the fuck out. I thought I was gonna be abducted. Phone call I could do, but there's no way I was gonna get into a trucker's cab to look for his phone. "Yeah, no," I said sternly, but half-heartedly, as I almost thought that this guy was joking with me. After a few moments, the trucker then says, "You won't help me look for it?" My adrenaline was pumping, so I yelled back, "Get out of here," in a threatening tone, knowing damn well I had nothing to defend us should something go wrong. I put my doggo back into the car and pulled out my phone to pretend I was calling the cops, while he slowly drove and then stopped again to ask if I was going to help. I then screamed again, "No, get the fuck out of here. I'm calling the cops." After that reply, he stepped on the gas and exited to the freeway. I stood and watched when finally my girlfriend exited the rest stops, wondering why I looked like I just saw a ghost. I don't know if it was an overreaction, but it sketched me the fuck out how he asked me to get into his truck. For this story, we have to rewind to last summer, specifically the night of August 12th. With the intention of watching the meteor showers, my partner and I packed up a towel and some takeout dinner and headed to the huge park in our city. In this park, there's a big wooded area that we thought was ideal to watch the sky since it was almost pitch darkness. We had to use our phone flashlight to navigate and chose a place to lay down our towel, just so you could picture how dark it was. So we get there, we turn off our flashlights and play some chill music on my phone. We're both looking at the sky. If we looked around us, we saw pitch black. The only light was in the horizon. It may seem irrelevant at this point, but I was wearing a sundress that had to be tied at the waist, and I untied it to be more comfortable in the position I was laying in. After about 10 minutes of unsuccessfully trying to see a shooting star, I lower my sight and start taking notice of our surroundings. My boyfriend is sitting to my right, still looking at the sky. To my left, I notice some movement. I try to focus my eyes on it. I can only see the outline, but I can tell that there's something approaching us. My first thought is, oh, there's a dog. But for some reason I feel unsettled and can't take my eyes off of it. As it comes closer and I can see more of it, thanks to the distant light in the horizon, I tell my partner there's something coming towards us. I believe it's a dog. Before I can even finish the sentence, it hits me. It's not a dog. It's a man. He's crawling on all fours in an animalistic way, with his chest close to the ground. My boyfriend bolted to his feet. I felt paralyzed in fear while he urged me to get up. I'll grab our stuff. You have to get up. I was trying to tie my dress back, but I was so nervous that I couldn't. Come on, we need to leave. He took my hand and we started rushing through the woods towards the lit part of the park. I couldn't stop looking back. We were both very shaken up, and honestly, I'm so thankful that I wasn't alone in the woods that night. This story happened recently, and for some context, me and my friends are teens that like to explore and do stupid stuff like normal teenagers do. We found this tunnel that was a drain under a busy road. We had to crouch and sit on our skateboards to explore since the height of the tunnel was very short. As we were going deeper and deeper into the tunnel, it gets pitch black and our flashlights from our phone can only reach about 5 feet in front of us. So we were blind to what we could come across until we were very close to it. In this tunnel, I remember the wall was painted in all red and had sheets of metal with white handprints connected to clothespins. We decided to keep going until we reached what we thought was a dead end. It was not. On the left, there was a more square tunnel compared to the rectangular shape we were in. In the distance that connected the tunnel, there was a bright light coming from the outside, shining from above onto a red shopping cart with belongings in it. We slowly inched towards the light where the shopping cart was. The lights turned out to be a big hole in the ground that we could crawl out of if we needed to escape. As we were about to pass the shopping cart, my friend, who was in the lead, was too afraid to go forward anymore. It was pitch black 5 feet from where we were. I decided to take the lead and keep going. I stepped past the shopping cart and stopped. I didn't know what it was, but I was afraid. I had a gut feeling that something was back there. I slowly moved back and stopped. I swear I saw something move from the deep dark of the tunnel. Before I could put everything together, a loud echo of someone pounding an object on the wall of the tunnel struck me, causing everyone to freak out and crawl out of the escape hole. Once we got out, a homeless man ran up to us, asking what we were doing in there. We told him that we were just exploring. He explained to us that there's a man that lives underground in that tunnel, and he would have probably killed us if we went further. This man was apparently crazy and threw rocks at the poor guy's head before. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but even though that was scary and dangerous, it was fun, and I'm glad I experienced it. Backstory: I'm a 32-year-old female. I grew up in Ukraine, a major city, with my younger sister, only 7 minutes from the downtown, but the lifestyle was pretty much rural. Everyone has orchards and gardens. Many kept animals for food. We got milk and eggs from our neighbors, fish from our local ponds and lakes. Kids of all ages walked around unsupervised, and adults would get together under the streetlights to talk while the kids played. Unpaved roads, everyone walked or took public transportation. Winters were very slushy, and summers were very dusty. Electricity was very unstable, and we spent many nights in the dark. A piece of cloth dipped in oil makes a great candle. We were that damn poor. Our mother was an alcoholic, fall down on the streets, mud alcoholic. No dad. I always wanted a dad. When I was about 8 or 9, she met a man with his own apartment in more of a city-like area. The apartment had heat. Our house did not, so we started staying there for the winters. To get there, we had to walk between 2 mountains in the woods, and right before, there was this open-air market that also had some kiosks, which mostly sold alcohol and tobacco products. So on to the story. So this one day, my sis and I went to try and trade some bottles for coins, so we get something to eat that day. But at the time, most places didn't accept colored bottles. With disappointment, we walked to this step-boyfriend's place through the woods, and this man comes out of nowhere and said he's been watching us and felt bad for us, so he wanted to give us money. Of course, 2 hungry grown kids couldn't resist the offer, so we followed him as asked. He leads us to the corner with a bush and drops his pants. I immediately felt terrified and grabbed my sis. He asked us to touch it, but I refused. I was kind of the spokesman for both of us, being that I was the older one. He starts to do what I now know to be masturbating, and at the time I was just very scared and confused. So I angrily asked, "You promised us money, where is it?" He finishes on the bush and hands us some change. Looking back, we must have had a guardian angel or something, because boy, that could have turned dangerous so fast. He was watching us and definitely saw 2 unsupervised, poor dirty kids as an easy target. People like our mom shouldn't have kids. We got very lucky. She passed away from drinking, and we were sent to an orphanage, where we eventually got adopted to the United States, both of us. But so many aren't so lucky, and I always wonder, why me?